This story happened when I was very young. I was 7 years old, but that night I remember everything now down to the smallest detail. My mother's voice, the numbers on the clock, how the door lock clicked, and the creepy music from the movie One at Home, which I still can't remember without trembling. My parents started leaving me at home early in the 90s. No one even thought about any paid babysitters back then, and life wasn't easy. Getting out to friends for a holiday was already an event. So that time they left for someone's birthday, leaving me at home for the night one. It was only the second or third time when I stayed one. Parents repeatedly repeated the usual rules. I wasn't allowed to watch TV for a long time before going to bed. Turn off all the lights in the apartment. I was allowed to leave only the night light by the bed, so the TV is on, and of course the most important thing. It was literally drummed into my little blonde head not to open the door under any circumstances, even if there was a woman or a child behind it, even if they said that a fire had started and I urgently needed to escape, even if there was someone I knew all this well. But this time the father was struck as especially serious, and before leaving he squatted down in front of me, looked carefully into my eyes and said, "Mark, you're already a grown boy, and you need to understand what responsibility is, right? Listen to me carefully. If it's 12 o'clock on the clock, if it's 12 o'clock on the clock, don't turn on the light and don't open the door. I understand. I'm counting on you, son." I nodded. I understand why he was such a serious father, and he was a little weird. He liked to come up with different rules for me, which at first glance, they looked a little absurd. On some days you couldn't wear red clothes, on others, you couldn't take a bath. I was constantly confused about these prohibitions, and sometimes I even got hit for it by my father. I'm still not sure if these rules were his strange fantasies or not, but I learned that at 12 you need to keep the door closed for the rest of my life. My parents left. I waited a couple of minutes listening to the silence. Then I took off and quickly ran around the apartment, turning on the lights in all rooms, let them burn everywhere, so the light made the shadows in the corners less scary. Staying one I was always a little afraid of. I don't know what the fear was. Strange, not sharp, but kind of sticky like a cold film. He didn't jump out, he didn't make me scream, but he sat quietly somewhere inside like a shadow in the corner. The TV was a salvation. I sat down on the couch and turned it on. The screen flashed, and I was immediately enveloped in a feeling of delight. But after 10 minutes I caught myself listening. It seemed as if someone was fumbling at the door. Of course there was no one there, but the thought that my parents would not return suddenly overwhelmed me. And what if something happened to them? And what if they were robbed? They had an accident. They are now so far away, and I do not even know where exactly. It became cold inside, and my palms suddenly sweated. I felt uneasy. I jumped up from the couch and rushed. There was a huge cream-colored phone with a long twisted wire. It stood on a shelf against the wall in the hallway. I had to stand on tiptoe to reach the buttons, but I still couldn't pick up the phone. It seemed that my parents were somewhere very, very far away, as if there were not a few kilometers between us, but a whole other world. I sat down on the sofa, pulled my knees up to my chest and stared at the TV again. Suddenly, I heard something that made my heart beat faster. Somewhere far behind the door in the entrance, someone was slowly descending the stairs. Step, pause, I froze. The footsteps outside the door were slow, measured, and ominous. I tried to convince myself that it was just a neighbor who came home late from work, but then why was he moving so strangely? And then there was a sound, which made my fingers tremble. I pressed myself into the back of the sofa. It could have been anyone. A neighbor, an acquaintance, just someone who was at the wrong door. "Mark." Someone's voice was muffled, unintelligible, as if the speaker was standing too close to the door, whispering through the keyhole. I wanted to jump up and hide, but I couldn't even breathe. "Mark." Opened my head. The TV was spinning. The sound was muffled. I continued to show the conclusion of the bandits, but I no longer saw it, only the dark apartment around and the closed door. My eyelids became heavy. I blinked and suddenly woke up. There was a picture of prevention on the TV. I dozed off and the movie ended a long time ago. I ran my hands over my face, pushing away sticky sleep, and looked at the clock. 12:02. My heart began to beat faster. My father's words surfaced in my head at 12:12 p.m. I didn't get out of bed, didn't turn on the light, didn't open the door. I still had 10 minutes left, I thought, and went to the bathroom, yawned, turned on the light, and began brushing my teeth. The mirror dimly reflected my pale face, and in the silence I could only hear the scratching of the brush. And then, after finishing my preparations, I ran through the whole apartment again and turned off the light from the living room. I went out into the hallway and then into my bedroom. I try not to look out the windows. The door to the hallway was closed as it should be. Everything is in order. I crawled under the covers, pulled it up to my nose, and closed my eyes with relief. I opened them again. There was a soft knock. It was quiet but distinct. I slowly turned my head to the clock at 12:12. My chest felt cold. It was the same sound as in my dream. I was not breathing. The knock was repeated, this time more insistently. Besides, usually at night there are some sounds in the stairwell. The elevator slams, the old steps creak, for one of the neighbor coughs at the door. But now there's nothing, and suddenly open it. I'm Mom's voice. I shuddered with relief, although it's strange that Mom didn't say she would come so early. And anyway, I slipped out of bed on tiptoe and went into the hallway. Suddenly Mom felt sick and she decided to come back early. And Dad stayed with friends. Or suddenly something happened to Dad, an accident suddenly. He won't come back anymore. The thought that something happened to Dad made me feel sick again. I climbed on a stool and looked through the peephole. Mom was standing there. I almost opened the door, but something stopped me. She was strange. Her eyes were black, motionless, as if painted. Her hands were hanging at her side, her fingers were trembling a little. And then Mom ran away, and I hit the door with all my might. The crash was so strong that the stool under me swayed and I fell to the floor, hit my elbow, screamed. There was another bod, impact on the door from outside. This time stronger. I screamed and couldn't remember myself from fear. Ran into the bedroom where I ducked under the covers and covered my head with them. And then the bell rang. A thin, unpleasant he sounded for longer than usual, until he suddenly stopped, leaving behind a silence in which even his own breathing seemed too loud. Through the fabric of the blanket, he saw that the light in the room began to blink once, and suddenly, I should have been back a long time ago. I slowly swung my legs off the bed, wrapped myself in a blanket, and padded into the hallway. I sat down in front of the door, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and sat with my back against the wall. I waited for my parents to wait and tell them everything. Apparently, I dozed off, and suddenly I was awakened by the sound of footsteps outside the door. I held my breath. I heard the key go into the lock. I turned with all my might. Seal clenched the blanket in his fists.